Hello everybody and welcome to this new video for 2023 around Formula 1. Yes, the sport of Formula 1 is back for the 2023 season, and did we have a good race? Well, that's what we're here to find out alongside my guests Jamie Davies and Liam Bond. So, gentlemen, I'll literally just start off with the easier question. I mean, we could end the show straight away with this question, but I'll ask Jamie first. Jamie, I know you only watched the highlights, but was the Bahrain Grand Prix a good first race of the season?
I'm going to say yes, because I think, I'm going to say it very briefly, with Aston Martin introduced in the top part, it's looking feisty. Mercedes struggling, Ferrari struggling, but they're up there with Red Bull as well. I think we might have 4 teams up for it this season. So I'm going to say yes.
Oh, good. Liam, what are your thoughts on that first race of the season?
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with Jamie. I think on the whole it was good. Obviously, I think if we take the Red Bull situation out of the way there, and we'll go into that, they're by far and away the leading pack at the moment. But I think there'll be things that will come into contention during the rest of the season, and it's very promising that we've got Aston Martin in there now as well. I think there is going to be, they look like they have some genuine pace, and there's going to be a real battle for that second, third place, I think, which is really interesting.
Yeah, if you do see Liam's beautiful face just freezing every now and then, that is the Zoom call. So we do apologise if you do see that on the stream, but hopefully it'll flicker out.
MI5.
Yeah.
MI5 Wi-Fi absolute shite at Liam Bond is.
Yeah, someone's taking the Wi-Fi down in that area. So before we go on to some of the important topics, I will, of the first race of the season, I will just go through some stats of the race and obviously the weekend in general. So as a whole, normally, since 2017, the winner of the opening race has finished runner-up in the championship. So in terms of Max Verstappen, he'll be hoping that he can change that around going into this season. And he actually hasn't won the opening race of the season at all, and it's his 9th attempt of winning the Bahrain Grand Prix. So interesting stats if people were putting bets on before this weekend. I mean, Max Verstappen not winning the opening race before is an interesting stat. Red Bull qualified 1-2 and finished 1-2 in a race for the first time since 2013 back in Abu Dhabi, which again is a stat from way back beyond. And of course, Fernando Alonso, who we're going to bring up as well, just a couple of points from him. He scores only his second podium finish in the last 122 Grand Prix. The last one came in Qatar 2021. And yesterday was his 22nd anniversary as well of his debut, which was Australia 2001. But we will start with obviously Max Verstappen and Red Bull. I think personally, obviously, starting the season, we've had a few bits of testing. You know, obviously, there's been a lot of talk about Aston Martin, of course, Fernando Alonso, who we will come up and speak about in the show as well. But I think, like, obviously, when a new season comes around, you hope that there's going to be new battles, closer racing, and obviously more fighting at the front, of course, as we always do as Formula 1 fans when it comes back around. But I think that lasted for me about half a lap. And then I saw Max Verstappen was 4 seconds ahead, and I thought, oh, well, that's that gone. So I don't know what your guys' thoughts were on that, but of course, like, Max Verstappen took victory, and it was basically a bit of a walk in the park, really. He led all the way from lights out, only swapped on lap 14 for his first pit stop, and then went on to the hard compound tyre on lap 36, and he won by 11 seconds from Sergio Perez. And I know, Jamie, big Sergio Perez fan, but like Max Verstappen was just in a world of his own yesterday, wasn't he?
I don't know what you're talking about. I always go with the winner. But no, I'm joking. I must admit, to be honest with you, I forgot all about who was leading the race. I was always intrigued by the battle for the podium and what was going on with Carlos Sainz. After Charles Leclerc's car stopped, I thought, is Sainz going to have the same problem? Are we going to have 2 DNFs for Ferrari? But that didn't happen. And obviously the battle between Alonso and Hamilton was probably my highlight of the race, by the way. Because of all that happening, you forgot what was happening on the front row. And I'll be honest with you, lads, I think that's what's going to happen a lot this season, where if Red Bull have good qualifying, I think they're going to have a good race. And we're in a third season now where Perez, who knows what his role is? He's number 2. He's the Valtteri Bottas, the Rubens Barrichello of Red Bull at the moment. Whether Checo likes it, he has to accept it. I'm sure he knows now what his role is, and because he's used to that, I think it makes Red Bull and Verstappen even stronger because there's that trust there between both the drivers, the engineers, and they've done it twice before in 2 seasons. So for me, my only concern is the championship being the same as last year in terms of who wins it. But maybe this is another season where we just look at seeing how far Alonso can go with Aston Martin. Or Aston Martin, the full package this year. That we really know what can happen in a few races' time. Maybe George Russell. We forget about him as well at Mercedes in his second season. Who beat Hamilton last year. I mean, it's quite a lot to think about. The way I see it, I think it was a good race outside the top spot.
Yeah, Liam, your thoughts on that? Was it? I mean, to be honest, I'm a bit like Jamie. I think about 10 laps to go, and maybe the last couple of laps, obviously, is when they showed Max Verstappen just driving around on his own. But the majority of it actually was spent looking at the other parts of the field. I mean, are you sort of? I mean, we've put in the chat here that people are voting for. Can Max Verstappen be stopped in 2023? I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Is he just going to run away with it with the setup that they've got at Red Bull?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things really. I think the first thing is George Russell summed it up after saying that he thinks that Verstappen and Red Bull are going to walk every race now. So a lot of the, I think even like the majority of the field are consigned to that fact. Secondly, I agree with both of what you guys have said, and I think as well when you look at Sergio, I think the thing that's probably in the back of his mind as well, that they've got an Australian reserve driver who's waiting in the wings should Checo fall foul. We know how ruthless Red Bull are at changing their drivers over, especially their second driver. And we know Daniel Ricciardo's got a good relationship with them, so he can easily come in if Checo's not performing to what Red Bull want him to perform as, or to their liking. So Checo kind of knows that he's got to be that supporting role for Max, because if he slips up in any way, shape or form, then Daniel's going to come in and probably steal his seat. I think that's
my concern as a Perez fan. I was saying to someone the other day, it was actually Burgoyne who's put a message in the chat. I was saying to him before the season started, I fear this is Perez's last Red Bull season, despite what he's done for the team. And maybe it could be his last season F1. I don't know. Could he do a Bottas and go to a lower team after being with a top team? It's for some people their motives just isn't there. You've been at the top team. What's there left to do? And he's been there. He's been around for 12 years now. I never thought I'd say that about Perez when I started following him all those years ago.
Well, it was a point I was going to mention actually, because I'm sure it was on Mexican TV or Spanish TV that they were asking Sergio Perez this season what he was actually going to be like. Because obviously they had that inter-team fight, you would say, in Sao Paulo last year, where Max obviously wouldn't help him out, and I think Sergio Perez's answer was that if he didn't get his way, then Max wouldn't get his way, if it makes sense, in terms of he wouldn't be helping Max as much this year if he wasn't going to help him out when really Max was in the lead, and he could sort of help Perez out. So I mean, with that, he can only sort of go so far with that, Jamie, really, because as you say, he can be a bit like solo this year if he wants to try and fight for the championship, but he can only do that so much because, as Liam mentions, Daniel Ricciardo is sitting there, so he can only sort of be solo for so long before Red Bull go, well, you know what, mate, we'll just swap you. So it's quite an interesting topic, isn't it?
I won't worry about Daniel Ricciardo. He's overrated, but my thoughts on him. He's not a proper racer compared to Perez. With Perez, you're in safe hands compared to Ricciardo. That I will tell you, because we'll have it again with Ricciardo and Verstappen. They'll crash again. I'm sure of it, because Ricciardo had that moment with him in Baku. I never cared whose fault it was. It happened, whether you like it or not. It happened. You can blame it on whoever. The good thing he had that day was that no one blamed each other like Vettel and Webber did 12 years ago or 13 years ago in Turkey. But the one thing that I said to you, didn't I? Ricciardo leaving Red Bull was one of the worst decisions he ever made, and now he's back. there after all these years. If he's back in the main seat, fantastic. But I can't see him and Verstappen working well together. And quite frankly, I'm surprised Christian Horner's brought him back, because I felt like that was a middle finger to Red Bull, to be honest. Oh, we brought you in, and you're going to do that to us? Okay, we'll do what you did, what Carlos Sainz did to us. We'll let you go. Forget about you. But in terms of the whole prize situation, I think you're right. Where take the chance now instead of getting to the point when you're 60 and you look back and think, man, I was in the fastest car in F1. Why didn't I challenge for the championship? But I just don't think his car is as quick as Verstappen's. Verstappen, of course, will get an advantage of certain parts that will come to his car throughout the season that Checo won't have access to. And that's why I can't see anyone stopping Verstappen. Maybe Perez, maybe Alonso. There's still 22 races to go, so we've got a long season ahead. I just hope, for all of our sakes, that that we don't have it all decided by race 13 or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that we're going to worry about. I mean, in terms of 12 months later, it was a better performance from Red Bull, because if we go back to the first race last year, they had a double DNF before the race actually finished. So considering where they are now, finishing 1-2. And you would say maybe their main title rival, and maybe their number. I mean, they don't actually have a number one driver in Ferrari, but you would probably say it's Charles Leclerc. And the fact that he had a DNF yesterday, I mean, that again just helps Red Bull already in the Constructors' Championship. So, I mean, I haven't really put Ferrari down on here, because as usual they sort of what do you really say about Ferrari? I mean we could sort of mention the fact that Fred Vasseur has come in now, and again another change of leadership with Ferrari this year. Do we really think that Ferrari are going to be there and actually challenging on a regular basis, or do you think it's just going to be Perez helping Verstappen for the rest of the season?
I think they've got the fastest engine if they can turn it up, can't they? But I think that's the whole issue, as they found out in testing. I think the Alfa Romeo team on the last day turned the engine up to full power, and it went kaput. So, or something like that. So, yeah, it's a hard one, because you want Ferrari to do well. On pure pace, they are probably the closest challengers to Red Bull. They just got to get their reliability intact and hopefully their strategy intact as well. Obviously, there's so many mistakes from last season. Have they got a bit of a hangover from that, because they were really in it until probably the European end to the season, in terms of sort of thinking sort of Spa and Monza, when really Verstappen just kicked on. But I mean, I hope the Ferrari engine is good, and they kind of get their act together, because I think it's only good for the sport that we have sort of challengers to Red Bull, and I think definitely at the moment that would be Ferrari. Obviously, Aston is a bit of an outlier. How good will they be able to keep up that pace over the course of the whole season? Obviously, they had a fantastic result at the weekend, and it'd be great if they can continue that vein of form. But really, if we're being realistic, probably Ferrari is the closest one to Red Bull.
Yeah,
I think it's like, no, go on, Jack.
No, go on, Jamie. Yeah, go.
No, I was just saying. I mean, I think when you're going about who's number one at Ferrari, it's still Charles Leclerc. I think the end of last season will tell you as well in terms of forms, where I think Carlos Sainz only found himself on the podium twice in the last 10 races, while Charles Leclerc, in all fairness to the guy, despite the season being dominated by Verstappen, we forget how consistent Leclerc was in what was not the best of Ferrari cars. Even though they were one of the best teams, that car could have done a lot more, I feel. And because of the fact that they slipped up so early on last season, Verstappen won it already by the time it was halfway through. Me and you, Jack, were counting the days of 2023, like, oh, it's just getting worse, isn't it? It was even getting to the last few races I didn't watch, because it's like, what's done and dusted, mate. Yeah. The only thing I care about now is Perez getting second, and that didn't happen. But I think that you can tell, couldn't you, lads, how when Leclerc team radio, when his car went into the sand, he literally just... he didn't do his old no. He was kind of more lower tone. It was like he wasn't shocked, but it was still like can't afford to slip now because Red Bull are like the Man City or Arsenal in football, where they'll win most of the time, so you can't afford to let them get so many points away from you when they win, basically. So, if that makes sense. So, yeah. I do think Leclerc's in for a good season still, but yeah, Ferrari got to get themselves going now. Luckily they haven't got a race this weekend, so they've got a bit of time. Not much travelling either to Saudi Arabia from Bahrain, so they should be able to hopefully fix it, but we'll see. Carlos Sainz, he'll be like, no, I'm happy with my car, mate. Nothing wrong with mine.
Well, I think the worst thing about that was that I'm pretty sure before the race, they actually changed components on that car in Part Ferme. So I'm pretty sure they already changed the control electronics and energy store in that Leclerc car, and then it broke down. So they're already behind on parts before they've even got to the second race.
I mean, you say the energy store. Did they order that? Was it those prime bottles that everyone's talking about, thinking that would work?
Perhaps they needed a bit of Red Bull in the back of that Ferrari. That might have helped.
Yeah, they got the cans with no branding on it. Went, is that Red Bull? Shush! Don't tell them. They'll know.
It's bull red, but it'll do. Yeah. But before, obviously, we'll move off Ferrari, and we'll talk about the man of the day. And to be honest with you, the man saved the Bahrain Grand Prix for me, and that was, of course, Fernando Alonso, absolutely starting the 2023 season with spectacular fashion, with a podium, with battles between the likes of the Mercedes pair of George Russell and Lewis Hamilton, as Jamie mentioned earlier. I mean, the man's 41 and he's getting into that Aston Martin car and he's absolutely giving it what for. And you could hear some of the, I mean, there was a team radio during the race, and it brought me back to like the McLaren days where he's being sarcastic, but he was actually being honest when he's saying this was a lovely car to drive. And it was like, finally, after like 5 or 6 years of Fernando Alonso being in pain driving a race car, he's actually happy. I mean, your thoughts, Jamie, on Fernando Alonso?
I mean, 13 years ago, Michael Schumacher came back to F1 at the age of 41, and Eddie Jordan said, why are you putting your body through it? Why are you doing this again? You've got nothing to prove. You won 7 World Championships. What do you want? And obviously, Schumacher did 3 more seasons, and Eddie Jordan was right. It was the most pointless thing. I mean, there's nothing wrong in someone doing what they love, but if you're trying to, sadly, the fans don't look at it like that. They look at it and think, no, you're here to win the World Championships. And that was at the age of 41 of Michael Schumacher. The age of Fernando Alonso was way better than Michael Schumacher at age 41 from what I'm seeing. But, you know, Fernando Alonso, as you say, Frank, like with his car, after all these, in hindsight, terrible team transfers to McLaren, Honda, we all thought was going to happen. That was just as big of a fraud as Pacquiao versus Mayweather. You know, it just didn't work that year whatsoever. Ferrari kind of was okay, won a few races, had a couple of championship close seasons, but just didn't get to the finish line with Ferrari. And then, of course, Alpine, who cares? We forget that very quickly. But when you see the race between Hamilton and Alonso, I think it was last season or the season before, when Hamilton was obviously inevitably going to get past Alonso, but it took so much longer than the other drivers because Alonso's kind of like telling him, you'll get past me, but I'm going to make this really, really horrible for you because I'm a naturally born championship racer. I am a good driver. And of course, at the end, the pace won for Hamilton. Yesterday, it was like Alonso got his own back on Hamilton and went, now you know how it feels. I've been saying, and he's been saying this for years, Alonso, about Hamilton winning all these world championships. He said, maybe if I was in his car, I'd probably win that amount of championships. That's not a slight dig. That's just honesty. So I'm loving the fact that he's at least had this in his first. This is his first race as well for Aston Martin. Couldn't ask for a better start. Well, apart from win the race, but yeah, there we go. But yeah, bring on the rest of the season. I really hope that he succeeds very well. And you know, it's mad to think a few years ago I had a tear in my eye when he was doing the donuts at Abu Dhabi, thinking that's it, and no more Fernando Alonso.
Yeah.
I mean, have we already seen parts of the season as well? That battle that he had with Lewis, and then the pass.
I hope we see more.
Was fantastic. I think those two are going to be they're going to be the ones that keep people coming back to watch more races in their fights, even if they're fighting the second, third, fourth, because that's what everyone wants to see. I think what was really nice is I saw pictures there at the end that they were sort of hugging and congratulating each other in Parc Fermé as well. So there's we obviously know as F1 fans throughout the years the massive rivalry that those two have, and maybe they on the outside don't look like they're the best of friends, but I think there's also massive respect between the two now, especially as they've matured and they've gotten older, and they're the two oldest in the field right now. So they're in a sense they're probably working together to prove something to the young ones coming through, and I think they proved it with their racing yesterday. I thought it was fantastic. Those 3 or 4 laps when they were really jostling with each other.
Yeah,
I think when you look at Vettel, Raikkonen, Jensen, Button, they're real championship drivers. Give them a car, they'll do it. They're just brilliant drivers. They're just so gutless. They just do it, and that's what I loved about Alonso's inside take on Hamilton yesterday. When he did that, even the commentator and even DC, David Coulthard, a man himself who used to race at the top, they were all stunned to see Alonso do it. I'm like, it's just brilliant racing. Only he would have done that. It's just, it's so good. It was so good to watch.
And on the other channel, there was a comment that Martin Brundle made where he said Alonso is one of the only few drivers. I think he said Schumacher had it as well, Senna had it as well, where they're so confident in their ability. They can think of what the driver in front is going to do, and you could just tell that with Alonso that he's exuberant confidence in that car. And he's thinking about what the other driver is doing in front of him, and that's something that not many drivers have that ability, do they really?
Yeah, I mean,
I think sorry, go on, Jack. I've spoken enough.
No, I was just going to make a silly comment saying I've tried that move a number of times and we've both ended up in the wall on the video game. So, I mean, fair dues to Fernando Alonso for making that move stick. I mean, to be honest with you, the Lewis Hamilton and the Fernando Alonso battle was a great one midway through the race because I think it got be back interested after seeing Max Verstappen, flying off into the lead. I also think that George Russell and Alonso last year had a good, and I think the last couple of years have had good battles. Even when Russell was in the Williams, they still had decent battles at the back. But I feel like both of them were very respectful. They were very close in their battles as well between each other. But they both left each other just enough room when they were making their moves in the first sector over a couple of laps. So I would say that was a good battle as well between both Mercedes. But the one question I sort of want to ask both of you is where the hell has that pace come from the Aston Martin? Because I mean they showed a little bit at the end of the season, but surely Seb Vettel's sitting at home now thinking, bloody hell, I could have been in that this year.
Yeah, I mean we see that now and again when certain drivers leave F1 and it's like, oh bugger, why didn't I just stay for one more year? But I think we all know Vettel had enough, didn't he? I think he signed out of F1 2-3 years ago. From what I saw in his interviews, he just didn't look up to it whatsoever. With the car, I don't really know. I mean, we got told, and we all knew in testing, didn't we, last weekend, that it's clearly a competitor right now. And of course, testing was in the same circuit, so we were going to get similar results from the weekend. The question is, can it do it for the rest of the year? Where we see cars now and again start off well from mid-table teams, but then when it gets later on in the season, they start to run out of steam and the parts aren't there for them compared to other teams as well. I mean, Force India were always known for they'd always get better later on in the season instead of the start. They'd have a shambles start, then by the halfway point, they would get better and better, and then it's like, oh yeah, we've got to come up with a new car next year. Crap, that's going to be costly. But I don't know. It's just nice to see another team in it. We're seeing Ferrari struggle, we're seeing Mercedes struggle, maybe Mercedes need to realise that they can go over the cap just like Red Bull did, and maybe that might just work out for them, but maybe not.
Well, I was
They've got a new technical director as well, don't they? I think Aston Martin was it from Mercedes, I think. So I think that seems to have helped them too. It sounds like Lawrence Stroll has really sort of strategically placed people in the right places, and they've done a lot of background work in the winter. I think what was most shocking, probably from Mercedes' point of view, is that the Aston Martin was the highest placed Mercedes engine car. So it'd be interesting to see how long Mercedes stick with their aerodynamic philosophy, or whether they look to change it. Because I think, was it Sergio Perez made a comment that there were 3 Red Bull cars on the podium yesterday. They'd obviously taken some inspiration from Red Bull's car last year, so it'd be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, I did hear that, and there was a bit of chuckling going on in that post-race interview. But I was going to bring up Mercedes, because Lewis Hamilton, after the race, sort of, said that they're in no doubt that they're now the 4th fastest team, with Aston Martin now taking that place. I mean, I think they thought that might be the case going from testing, but obviously, with different fuel loads, people are not sure in testing what the actual finished product is from each team. But I think after that, finishing 5th and 6th, I think, for Mercedes, unless I'm wrong. Yeah, so
no, sorry, 5th and 7th.
5th and 7th, bloody hell. Because Lance Stroll. I mean, a quick mention too, actually, before I go on to Mercedes. Obviously, with that accident he had before testing, for the fact that him to come back and actually get some decent points for Aston Martin as well, was pretty good going for Lance Stroll. So, but in terms of like Mercedes, I mean, how long do you think, Liam, that they're going to hold on to that aerodynamic or that structure that they've built on the car? Because a lot of talk was going into that before the race yesterday, and obviously where they finished, do we think Toto Wolff said that it's one of the worst days he's had in terms of team principle yesterday? How long do you think that they're going to hold on to that idea? Because obviously they had them issues last year and they held on to them all year, committed to that project basically. Do we see them changing as soon as possible almost, or do you think they're going to stick with it a bit longer?
It's a funny one, isn't it? I've from what I've seen, there's mixed messages. Some are saying that, I think it was Bono in their team, who's obviously Lewis's engineer, was saying that they think that there's potentially untapped potential there. They're starting to work it out, and it will come good. But they've been saying that since about sort of like the
half a year
section of last season. Half a year.
Yeah,
and you start to think, you guys have had the whole winter to look over this, and surely you would have seen the data and what was going wrong. Apparently, that I think they said that there's a cut-off where if they feel that this philosophy isn't working, they've got something in the background. But then, how do they decide on which technical upgrades to go with throughout the year, and where do they put their sort of resource into that? So I think they've got to decide very, very much sooner rather than later. I think within the next sort of 2 or 3 races, if they're still struggling and they're not developing at the rate that they thought they would be, I think they seriously have to consider changing it. Yeah. Changing that philosophy.
I mean, Jamie, before you say that, I mean, I just want to put the point out that Hamilton finished 50 seconds away from Verstappen in the end of that race.
Jesus. So... Yeah, that's quite a distance. I mean, this is the problem I've got with F1 racing, where I don't like seeing even the top 5 be so far away from top spot, because me, Jack, I stress and hate seeing F1 so dominated when it's like, come on, really? We got to do something here. It can't continue like this, because when you see someone even in the top 10 get overlapped by someone in the lead, it's not on. It's not on. I'm sorry, but you can't have that in F1. Yeah. These are meant to be the best drivers in the world. I know it comes down to the car as well, but it frustrates me, because what annoys me the most is that a friend of mine who works for McLaren as a speaker, he told me that he told me ahead of this season. I sent him a voice message. I was like, "What do you expect?" And he literally said to me, "I don't expect McLaren to do well. He thinks McLaren are going to go backwards again, but he also thinks that it'll just be like every time F1 brings in new regulations, a team makes the most out of it compared to the others. They win it dominantly, and then the next one comes in, and then you see what happens then. So when's the next regulations? 2026, is it?
Yeah. And
I do fear Red Bull will win the next 3 years of F1, to be honest.
But I mean, the question about that, Jamie, is that last year we had with the controversial championship win, that was the closest battle they had, and that was the end of that regulation. So the annoyance for me is that every time they decide they're going to change the regulation, the last season of the previous one is always the best because everybody's closer than they have ever
Everyone's
been.
Caught up, haven't they?
And then they go and change it, and it goes back to somebody's being absolutely dominant for 4 years until they close the gap, and then they go and change it again. So that seems to be the issue when they do it.
It's like what Ross Brawn said this time last year. He was saying about the slipstream, saying, it's a lot closer in racing. And I'm just thinking, I get what you mean between the two cars. It's exciting, but what about actual racing where the leaderboards are not like this? The gaps are like this big. I want it like that. I want it really close. I know I keep bringing MotoGP, and I apologise, but MotoGP has this thing where every single race is down to the last lap, where the last few corners is between the top 2 or top 3. I'm not saying F1 could. I mean, it's a completely different sport because those are motorbikes and these are whip cars. But I just look at it and think, is there a way F1 can make it a bit closer? But it's in a structure where it's down to how teams do with the cars and what money they've got, and follow the rules. Well, unless you're Red Bull, but it's one of those things. I can't make my mind up. But I've heard this for years. I've said this for years. You've heard enough of me saying it, Jack. But F1 needs a big shake-up. I don't know what the solution would be because I'd sound like a politician right now, or opposite politicians, and say, well, you can't do that. Well, give us a solution. I don't have one. Of course not. But that's how I look at myself with this, where I don't know how to fix it. But I'm going to go on a rant. My problem is that F1 is F1's one of them where it's a dying sport. And I've said this before. I've said it again. It's not changed. The only thing that's changed is the fan base. Amazingly, Liberty Media bought F1, and they were the right buyers in my eyes. They've made the product stronger, and they've brought in new fans. I can't believe how many people I see now, even on trains, watch the race instead of watch the football, for example, because Drive to Survive hypnotized all these people and got them into F1. But then they watch the races and they think it's actually not that great. Yeah, exactly. It's Drive to Survive that makes it look good because it's highlights of each season behind closed doors. It's just like that new golf documentary that's just come out, Full Swing. I love golf. It is a boring sport for many, but what happened behind the scenes last season was breathtaking because of Live Golf. But my point is that F1 hasn't changed in the last 10, 12, I'd say 10 years. Since 2013 was when I really had enough of F1, when it got really boring. Vettel won it dominantly, won every race in the second half of that season. And I remember going to a pub, watching the race, getting excited every Sunday, and then realising Vettel's 60 seconds ahead. 60 seconds ahead. We can't have this every week. This is just not on. It's no good for Vettel. It's no good for anyone. It's boring. I know we didn't win 7.9 seconds yesterday, but we won from the get-go. So my point is F1 needs to do something to change racing. I don't know what that is, but it's only popular because Liberty have done a very good job in marketing, something that you two do. And yeah, you guys could probably sell a pen and tell me it's the next Death Star, and I'd still buy it. But there we go.
I mean, Liam, while we let Jamie calm down from that, I mean, do you actually have the solution that Jamie's looking for, or can you sort of help it out?
It sounds like there's going to have to be quite a few solutions before we get to the one that Jamie's looking for. But, so anyone who's a fan of British touring cars will know this. I like British touring cars too, and they do quite a good thing where, I don't know if they still do it now, but if you won a race or a race weekend, you'd have maximum ballast for the next weekend, and the winner would then be weighted down a little bit. So I think there's certain things that F1 could possibly look at doing, where either you change up, rather than maybe change up the order, you'd have sort of like an extra weight put on your car to help with that. And I know sort of F1 is the pinnacle, and it's about who can produce the best sort of aerodynamically fastest car. But I think if we want to increase competition, I think there are little things that they could potentially look at bringing in. I don't know whether that's. I would have thought 100% that'd be something that Red Bull definitely does not agree with. Probably majority of the F1 community would agree with as well. But I think there's got to be conversation starters, because and it was the same when obviously Mercedes were dominant as well. It just doesn't look good for the sport. And I think we can all agree the best season that's been in the last 10 years it is that one with Verstappen and Hamilton, where they were so close to each other, and they were literally you couldn't pick who's gonna win each race. Yeah. So it'd be interesting to see what they do going forward. It feels like 2026 is going to be the next time we maybe see a different championship winner other than Red Bull, which is a shame. But you never know. The one question I was going to ask you guys is do we think that the restrictions to a Red Bull's development this year will hamper them and maybe increase that gap a bit for the rest? Or do we think that it's not going to really make a difference if Verstappen's 50 seconds ahead this race? He's probably going to stay like that for a good few race weekends.
Yeah, I mean, they kept it very much, in my opinion, they kept it very much under wraps last year, how much they actually spent on this year's car with the overspend of last year. I mean, they kept everything very quiet in terms of going over budget.
Sounds like Barcelona.
Yeah, as they would. So it would be quite interesting to see if what they've had hampered to them this year does actually affect them in terms of like maybe upgrades going into later on in the season. But it could be the case that they're so far ahead going to the halfway point that it wouldn't even matter if somebody brought an amazing upgrade, coming to Monza or Singapore. So I feel like, to be honest, that Max Verstappen, unless he has a terrible reliability period, which is not normally the case because that normally happens to Perez, that he's definitely going to go on and win this season quite comfortably in my eyes, which is a shame. But as you say, Liam, if we're having to wait till 2026 to have something that it's a bit more like somebody else winning the championship, that's going to be very depressing for Formula One fans. I mean, a point I will make to maybe have a bit of hope is the fact that Williams have made great progress this year. So there's certain parts of the midfield that have made great progression. So I feel like the fight yesterday in the midfield before the back of the grid and the midfield was a bit more competitive around each other. So both Alex Albon and, to be fair, rookie Logan Sargent did a decent job yesterday in the Williams. And I feel like them hiring James Vowles as team principal is actually a very good move. So I'll be interested to see how Williams develop over the next 12 months and going forward. I mean, Jamie, you mentioned somebody that you know in McLaren, but I mean, I have to point them out. I mean, to be fair, although you don't rate Daniel Ricciardo, he's probably took that paycheck and was sitting there drinking a pina colada yesterday on the beach and absolutely enjoying the fact that they've had an absolute stinker yesterday.
Yeah, Ricciardo's he's going to have the best year of his career this year. He's going to be able to put his feet up because his other years have been shit. But anyway, that's just my thoughts on Daniel Ricciardo. But you can smile what you want, mate. It ain't going to hypnotise me to your teeth. But what I will say is that you mentioned the midfield. That's the most exciting part of F1. If you had that at the front,
yeah,
you're laughing. You've got the best racing series in the world, no doubt.
Yeah.
That's all that's needed. It just needs a bit more at the front. That's all it needs. I just want to see Perez challenge Verstappen at least. I want to see, hopefully, Alonso challenge. I mean, he was still 38 seconds off Verstappen, but you just want to see that. You want to see Hamilton, Alonso, Verstappen going for it. Maybe a bit of George Russell as well. Even Valtteri Bottas just for fun. We'd love that, That's just what I want. That's what I've been wanting for a long time. Bernie's now gone. Can't rely on him anymore. Liberty Media. I have to rely on them now, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Americans are one of those. They invented NASCAR, so I'm not too too confident in what they do sometimes. But that's where we are.
Yeah. I mean, before I move to the top 3 drivers that you think are going to finish the championship, obviously we didn't do a preview show, so just quickly, your favourite livery of this year? I mean, the easiest one for me it's been in a long time, and that's Alfa Romeo. I mean, that looks a sweet looking car this year, especially under the lights yesterday. I have to say that's a very good looking car this year. So in terms of your guys' liveries, what's the best looking car this year for you?
Go on, you go, Liam.
Good question. I love how Jamie's let me go. I'd actually say that Aston Martin. I think the British Racing Green or whatever it is nice and it was nice and shiny. Again, lights. I think it looks very slick. It looks like how Aston Martin should do if it was in F1. So yeah, for me. And we're going to be seeing. I think we'll probably be seeing a little bit more of them this year if they're going to be at the front challenging. So it'd be nice to see that. And I think the advertisers will like that too. I think Lawrence Stroll is going to be raking that money in.
Jamie?
To be honest, that Alfa Romeo is sexy, isn't it? It's hard to go against that. I do quite like I don't mind the Williams car. It's a bit ugly, but it's quite nice in a weird way. But I'm going to say Alfa Romeo just because Valtteri Bottas is in it.
What a legend.
Can we have the worst one as well? Because I would definitely go for Alpine's pink. I don't like.
Yeah,
is that only for 2 races again though, and they're going back to blue because they did that last year?
Yeah, that's just confusing as well.
Yeah, I don't makes no sense. They should just leave it pink. I mean, that's a good call actually. I think that one. I mean, I actually thought the Haas looked really nice in its photography, but then when I saw it yesterday, I sort of forgot it was there. So, I mean, I might say Haas, but I think every year I have to go for the same one because this year they did this whole promotion. It was in New York, great spectacle, and they launched the same looking car. So that for me is Red Bull because every year they do this big show and they go, let's reveal. I can't wait to see what it is, and it's literally the same looking thing. So for me, every year it goes to Red Bull because it just looks exactly the same. I was going
to say Haas has to be the worst just because it's Quentin Steiner's team, so it's I can't be doing with that celebrity persona now. I wish he'd get on with his job, but that's my views.
Yeah, Gunter's only made that bad so we can chat about it on Netflix next year.
Exactly. That's why it's still there.
Chaps, I want to get your take before we wrap up the show. I want to get your take on who you think are going to be the top 3 drivers in the championship when we get to the last race of the season. So I'll start with Jamie pushed Liam forward last time, so I'm going to give it to Jamie first, just out of balance.
Oh.
So Jamie, from your point of view, who's finishing 3rd in the championship in Abu Dhabi?
I'm gonna say Alonso.
Ooh.
No. I'm gonna say Leclerc 3rd, Verstappen 2nd.
Right. Okay, I can see where this is going.
And Sergio Perez 1st.
Wow.
Because that boy can dream.
Wow.
But no, in all fairness, it'll be Verstappen. swap the 2 round.
Well, we can but dream. But Liam, are you going to bring us back down to earth with your prediction, or?
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. Unfortunately, it's not looking anything different from what Jamie said. I think I would go Leclerc 3rd, Perez 2nd, and Verstappen 1st. I really can't see anything other than that.
Yeah. I mean, I have gone slightly differently, so I've literally done what was on the podium. My praying in Fernando Alonso and Aston Martin, keeping them upgrades going throughout the year, is what's keeping me. I think Charles Leclerc, I think Ferrari strategy and reliability throughout the year are normally stinky, so I'm just going to be putting my faith in the fact that Alonso and Aston Martin can keep that going throughout the season. So I've got Fernando Alonso in 3rd, Sergio Perez in 2nd, and Max Verstappen 1st. Now, one quick point, maybe it might make us cry during the season, but I thought I'll ask it now. At what point do we think he's going to be crowned champion this year? What race are we putting that
Well, I'm just wondering, when's the Dutch Grand Prix? You'd want to be by then. No, I think that's a lot early on this year, isn't it? Oh, no, it's September, isn't it? Let's have a look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, God, yeah, he'll do it by then.
Yeah.
7th of August. First race back. First race back, he'll be bloody hell. Belgium Grand Prix is on before the summer this time.
Is it? Oh, is that because Las
Yeah,
Vegas?
yeah.
Is that because of Vegas? I'm guessing.
Maybe, yeah.
I can't remember. Is Monza after the Dutch Grand Prix or is it before?
I think it's after. Yeah, it's after. Actually, I'm hoping Vegas. I'm hoping Vegas because they should do a promotion. If you win the World Championship, you get like $10,000 to spend at Caesar's Palace, or or at the casino, and then you find out the next day Verstappen bankrupt after spending all his winnings on in the casino. A boy can dream, and then you see Checo. Yeah, he'll be happy.
Liam, out of that, I'm guessing was that Monza then?
No, I think it'd probably be slightly later than that. I'm hoping that maybe Perez will pick up a few wins, and the Ferraris, and maybe even Alonso gets a win here and there. So I'd probably say around maybe Japan, Suzuka. I would have thought that's my guess.
Perez's first win will be Azerbaijan, so fourth race in.
Yeah, that normally happens.
Loves that circuit.
That's a definite for sure. I mean, the thing I was going to put as I think Singapore is Singapore before or after Japan, Jamie. If you've got the calendar up,
it's normally before.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah, just before it.
Right, I'm going to say Singapore. I think he'll have it wrapped up by that point, which is sad. First race in, and you're already predicting how early Max Verstappen is going to wrap up this season. But who knows? We could be. We're only one race in, so we might be thinking the season is over already. But that is our top three. Jamie's probably going to clip that, so when it comes to Abu Dhabi, or when it comes to that point at the end of the season, we will know if we were right or wrong. But I think that sort of about wraps it up. I mean, anyone got any final thoughts on the first race of the season? Anyone got any positive thoughts for the rest of the season after we've been a bit downer for the last 10 minutes?
Support Aston Martin because it was a former Jordan F1 team.
Well, I hope Aston Martin got a front wing for their next race and not like that. A rear wing, should I say?
I still cannot find it. I broke it when I was a kid.
Liam, any positives before we end?
I don't know if it's a positive, but I really hope that Lando Norris gets given a good McLaren at some point, whether it's this season or next season, because I think he's a real dark horse in terms of driver ability compared to the likes of Verstappen and George Russell. If we're looking at and Leclerc, we're looking at new boys in. So I'm really hoping that McLaren sort themselves out, and that they do get some developments and they give Lando something that he can drive that McLaren with, because I think he deserves something. He's come so close before. So I'm bringing positivity to Lando, hopefully.
Well, let's hope so. But they definitely didn't start very well this weekend. Did McLaren? I mean, thank you for everybody that voted in the poll. It was a 50-50 split. Now I don't know if that was just being nice in the chat, but a 50-50 split to can Verstappen be stopped in 2023. So that will be interesting to see. But from my personal point of view, I think it's only a matter of time before he gets that third World Championship. But the next race is Saudi Arabia, and as we know, that race normally brings up a decent amount of excitement. It is earlier on in the season, as it was last year as well, but let's hope that it can add a bit more spice. Maybe we will see that Verstappen, Alonso, and maybe that Verstappen, Alonso and Hamilton battle in a couple of weeks' time. But Jamie, thank you. Liam, thank you very much for joining this show. And of course, we will do one after the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. So thank you everybody for watching, and we will see you all in the next one. Take care. See you soon.
So long, folks.
Yeah,